Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following all the news and rumors on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. I'm Daemon Hatfield, and this week we are focusing on the PlayStation 5 and the newly released Horizon Forbidden West. As always, joining me is Jonathon Dornbush, host of IGN's PlayStation Podcast Beyond.
Beyond. Hey, Damon.
There he is. And a very special guest joining us today over from the IGN UK office, Simon Cardy. He reviewed Horizon Forbidden West for IGN, and we especially thank him for joining us because the time that we're recording this episode, I know it's very late where Simon is in his part of the world. So Simon, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's not late for me. Don't worry. I barely sleep. So.
It's a night owl, that one. By the time you're watching this episode, Horizon Forbidden West will be out in the wild. Simon gave it a 9. I've been playing it for several weeks now. I absolutely love it. I agree with Simon's review in every way. Jonathon, I think you are also enjoying Horizon Forbidden West.
I disagree with everything Simon said, and I'm glad we have this forum to talk it out. I've been loving it. I was a big fan of the original, and I think they pretty much addressed almost everything I had, problem-wise with the first, and really expanded this universe.
Yeah. It is a little bit of a unique situation, though, for Sony, because the PlayStation 5, of course, this is a cross-gen game. It's available on both PS5 and PS4. And the PlayStation 5 has been out in the wild for 15 months now. It's actually in its third calendar year. And here we have a big marquee title for Sony and PlayStation that, they're still catering to the last-gen console as well. It's kind of allowed Sony to have its cake and eat it too. It can serve this enormous install base that has for the PlayStation 4, and then the premium Horizon experience people can enjoy on their PlayStation 5s. Those of us that are lucky to have one. So I guess the question I want to address is does Horizon Forbidden West on PlayStation 5 actually feel like a next gen game, in spite of the fact that it's a cross-gen game also available on PS4? Simon, I know you reviewed it on PS5. Mm-hmm. When you were playing it, did it feel like a PlayStation 5 experience?
I think it did. It maybe doesn't have the big one loud feature that screams this is a next gen game, but I think it all adds up in lots of little ways that the PS4 couldn't quite have reached. And just graphically, if we want, I don't know where we're going to go with this conversation, but graphically, just on the surface level, it looks incredible. I think maybe only Red Dead 2 and, for me, Forza Horizon 5 kind of reached that level of graphical quality. And I feel that combined with things we've seen in recent PS5 games like Miles Morales and Returnal, loading times are non-existent, little things like that I think we're almost a year into the consoles taking for granted in a way. These are all things we were begging for on last gen, which we're now getting, which do add up to this feeling like a next gen game to me.
Jonathon, what about you? Did any sort of the experience feel like it was being held back by the PlayStation 4 version?
Not necessarily, and I think it speaks to, one, what Guerrilla's done with this game, and then two, my excitement for when they are just focused on the PS5. I mean, I think what they've accomplished is so great, and had this been only on PS5, I would say, this is a pretty fantastic, first year and a half game for the PS5 when it comes to all the technical specs and everything. So I obviously they are having to make sure that this game runs and performs at a respectable enough level on the PS4 and PS4 Pro, especially because that's where the bulk of the player base is probably going to experience it for the first time. But in terms of it being a PS5 game, I think Simon kind of hit the nail on the head, and it goes back to something that we've talked about on the show that, Tom Marks had said way before the consoles were even out, of set your expectations a little bit, that this generational leap isn't going to be what we've seen of, the PS2 to the PS3 and Xbox to Xbox 360, that sort of HD leap and things like that, or the 4K leap that we've gotten. This is a bit more incremental, and I think you see that in so many of these smaller things that this game does, and how all of that adds up to making a more streamlined experience, whether it is load times, whether it is the bells and whistles of the DualSense, whether it is, draw distance and the fidelity of the incredible detail and graphical work that they've pulled off, the 3D audio. I think all of those things put together, like Simon said, probably one of them doesn't scream, this is the future of next gen, but all of them together, I think, represent a pretty elevated experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot that's been impressive to me. As Simon mentioned, the load times are virtually non-existent on PlayStation 5, especially as you just move about the world. The game never stops you and makes you wait for a second, even when you're getting in and out of cutscenes. When you fast travel, it'll dip to black and show a loading screen that's maybe there for 2 or 3 seconds, I think at most, and then you're back into the action. So that's a really nice sort of quality of life feature. I think the facial animations are some of the best I've ever seen. I don't know, Simon, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think, they're one of the standout things. I think just compare it to other Sony games. I think, The Last of Us 2 is one that I distinctly remember thinking these faces look incredible. And it's the same with this game. Like the eyes are maybe
that's
the most realistic eyes I've seen in a game. They're absurd.
Jonathon, did the facial animation stick out to you?
Yeah, I think especially for me, what's been a standout of Forbidden West in particular is how great the acting and the story have been. And I think luckily the character animation adds up for that. There's so much more nuance in their movement, in their facial expressions, especially just as conversations are going on. I think like actual reactive sort of minute changes in the way they're looking or thinking, and you see that reflected in the facial animations. I think all of that comes together in such a way that it most is present, I think, in the PS5 version, especially when you get down to full character detail, and especially looking at some of their outfits and the incredible sort of attention to detail in the fabrics and the way things come together, and all that little minute detail that you can get lost in when you're maybe in photo mode for too long. But it's very noticeable when conversations are happening as well.
Yeah, it really seems like Guerrilla addressed almost every issue that people had with the first game, which was already fantastic, of course. And then, Simon, one of the sticking points for you, which I agree with, is that traversal still seems like it's a little, I don't know, what's the word for it? Like, it's better than in the original game. I hate to bring up the comparison to Breath of the Wild, but that's not the only one. Other games like the recent Assassin's Creed games have gotten very good about traversal and just letting you run, go everywhere. Nothing's going to get in your way, right? But still a little bit awkward with Aloy in Forbidden West.
That's exactly how I feel. That there's just limitations that I don't feel need to be there, and I'm not asking for a Breath of the Wild style climbing system. I don't think every game needs that, just because this game doesn't have that same level of exploration. It has a good level of exploration to it, but it doesn't have that thing of like, oh, I wonder what's up there level that Breath of the Wild does. But I think you mentioned it, Valhalla is the touchstone for me. I feel like they hit that perfect middle ground of anything that looked like it should be scalable, like a wall, you could do it without looking for handholds. It just, you looked at it and you go, all right, I can climb up there, And I feel like this game could do, like, there's certain walls where you approach them and they may only be like 3 foot high. I feel like, I'm not an athletic gentleman, I can tell you that. I feel like I could scale it. And Aloy's just kind of jumping on the spot. And I'm just like, could you please climb up that so I don't get killed by this dinosaur? Because, I feel like they've definitely, like you said, made great steps from Zero Dawn, but it's not quite there in the climbing. I feel like it works for the puzzles because you kind of need limitations to the climbing for those to work. But generally in the world, when trying to get up to places, I would have just liked that Valhalla level of climbing.
Sure. Now, Jonathon, refresh my memory. Did you review Ghost of Tsushima?
I did not. Mitchell Saltzman did, but obviously played through that game. Platinum did, and have tried it both on PS4 and PS5. Yeah. Yeah,
I just thought that's a good little sort of comparison point, being that was really the last open world game from PlayStation Studios, I think. And it was a last gen game that has since been updated for PS5. But, as you play Horizon, how do you think it compares to Ghost of Tsushima? Like, does it feel like it's a generation ahead of it?
It's really interesting. I think it's hard because Ghost is clearly the culmination of literally an entire generation of work for Sucker Punch. So I think the gap is probably a little closer than a full generation, especially because they are both available on the same consoles with PS4 and everything. But I feel they're pretty closely matched in that regard. And I do think there are things about the world on a technical level that are more impressive on the Horizon side. I do think, to the points of traversal as part of it, their focus on world design is quite different, even though they are both open world games with, go to X places on the map to do these types of side quests. Here are, little pockets of civilization and whatnot. The Ghost really put an emphasis on naturalistic exploration. It built into the world itself, like the diegetic ways the world draws your eye and things. And that can happen in Horizon, but that feels like less of a stated goal for the world design. I do think it is more about going to those couple important places, finding, the group of robots that you need, and maybe stumbling across a bonus collectible or things like that. But they're going for different things in terms of that. So on a mechanical level, it's hard for me to compare, but I do think we're seeing advancements there. I do think it's fun to see what Guerrilla clearly learned from Ghost and what they're also doing on their own, what they're improving on Horizon, and probably how we'll see most likely Ghost 2 even further improve upon that.
Oof. Don't tease me. It's just another game that I love. So even though it's unusual to see Horizon coming out on both PS5 and PS4 in the history of video games, it does seem to be the status quo for Sony going forward, at least in the immediate future, looking at God of War Ragnarok and Gran Turismo 7. So I guess, Simon, after playing Horizon, does it instill confidence in you that these games are not actually going to be held back by their last gen versions?
I feel like it does, because if anything, this was the one I was maybe worried about that would be held back, because I think God of War Ragnarok will run pretty much, I don't know if it's been confirmed, but it looks like it's running on the same engine. It looks of a similar graphical quality to the last God of War to me, and that was already excellent. So, that's not putting down on that at all. But yeah, I feel like God of War will be, I don't think that'll be held back in any way. I feel like that's a similar sort of open world to Horizon. They're kind of slowly opens out, and people don't think of God of War as an open game, but that central hub is kind of open. It's got those Metroid elements that Horizon does actually have as well a bit. So I think they're very similar in a way. Gran Turismo, I feel like they're going to play very similarly. I don't know. I haven't had any hands on Gran Turismo. I was obsessed with Gran Turismo 3, but that's a long time ago now. So will it look as good? Probably not, and almost definitely not. But no, it gives me confidence. I feel like Sony are not just forgetting about last gen already, and they can't really afford to, as you've mentioned. Like, not many people relatively own a PS5 at the moment.
Sure. That's a good point. Well, Horizon Forbidden West is out now by the time you're watching this, and we wholeheartedly recommend you play it if you have a PlayStation 5 or a PlayStation 4. It is a very good video game. We've got the results of last episode's poll. We asked you, when do you think GTA 6 will be released, since it's confirmed to be in active development? The winning answer with 32% of the vote was 2024. So a couple years out. That seems reasonable. Only just under 8% thought it would be coming 2023 next year. So not a lot of people think they're going to be playing it within the next 12 months or so. I don't know, Simon, what do you think?
I would say that GTA is, I would say at least 2024. If you told me now, winter 2024, I'd bite your hand off. So let's go with that.
If it made 23, though, that'd be a nice 10 years since GTA 5.
It would be nice, but I would have thought we'd at least know something about it by now. But who knows? Who knows?
And then before we go, we've got a poll for you to vote on for next week. I guess we forgot to mention the next-gen version of Cyberpunk 27 is out now for both PS5 and Xbox Series X. So are you going to be playing the next-gen version of Cyberpunk? Yes, are you jumping in for the first time? Are you returning, or were you burned first time around and you've set it aside, not going to return to it? Make sure to vote at IGN.com, and we will share the results with you next episode. And that will do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch. Simon, thank you so much for joining us today. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. It was an absolute pleasure too.
Thank you to Jonathan. Thank you to Alan, working behind the scenes to make this episode possible. We'll be back next week with more PS5 and Xbox Series X news. 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern. Did I get that right, or did I flip that around? 6 a.m.
You got it.
9 a.m. Eastern with more next gen news and rumors.
2 p.m. GMT.
Yeah.
Don't forget about that.
Oh, man, it's so tight. Numbers, time zones are hard. I've only been doing this for like 2 years on this show.